All right, let's just jump right into this. Picture this incredibly cinematic scene in your head. It's August 1947. You've got an English lawyer sitting completely isolated in a sweltering, closed room in Delhi. The air is just heavy with unspoken pressure. He's surrounded by incomplete maps, confusing population tables, and he's armed with nothing more than a simple pencil. He is drawing an arbitrary boundary line. And what he didn't know, or maybe just couldn't fully grasp in that confined space, was that this single stroke of graphite was about to displace millions of people and completely rewrite modern history. Welcome to this explainer on the reality of India's 1947 partition. Today, we're unpacking a historical thriller of absolute epic proportions. It's a story that swings wildly from the unimaginable chaos of a frantically drawn border to the downright political miracle of integrating an entire, highly fragmented subcontinent. So, we're going to break down exactly how one of the most tumultuous years in human history actually unfolded. Let's get into it. Section 1. Drawing the impossible line. So, let's look at the man actually tasked with dividing the subcontinent, Sir Cyril Radcliffe. Now, he was a highly respected British legal mind, but get this, he had never even seen India in his life, let alone understood its incredibly complex cultural geography. In his schedule, terrifyingly rushed. Mountbatten announces the partition on June 3rd, but Radcliffe doesn't even arrive in India until July 8th. With independence set for August 15th, the guy had scarcely 5 weeks to decide the fate of 200 million people. Flying totally blind, he's making these monumental decisions right from a desk in Delhi. You know, before the borders were even finalized, a fundamental naming dispute showed just how deep the mistrust really ran. Muhammad Ali Jinnah demanded that the two new nations be called Hindustan and Pakistan, and that together they would constitute India. But on the flip side, Jawaharlal Nehru's stance was that Pakistan was breaking away, so India should just, well, remain India. Mountbatten actually agreed with Nehru, which deeply upset Jinnah and really set a tense stage for everything that followed. And this division wasn't just about vast stretches of land either. It was highly bureaucratic and honestly at times totally absurd. Officials were literally fighting over who got the typewriters, the library books, board pens, and yes, even a flock of 60 live ducks that had just arrived from England. I mean, a bill for £250 was pending, and the governments were deadlocked over whether these ducks belonged to West or East Bengal. It would almost be comical, right, if the broader context weren't so incredibly tragic? Which brings us to Section 2, the human cost. Because beyond the bizarre bureaucracy over ducks and paper clips, lay a macro-level human tragedy that is just, it's hard to even comprehend. 10 million people were violently uprooted in what became the largest migration in human history. Just to put that into perspective for a second, that is 5 million Hindus and Sikhs leaving their ancestral homes in newly formed Pakistan to cross into India, and 5 million Muslims leaving absolutely everything behind in India to cross into Pakistan. And most of these people were journeying on foot toward a country they had never even laid eyes on. The madness along these routes reached terrifying extremes as tension just boiled over into extreme violence. Trains that were meant to transport refugees safely became sites of absolute massacre. Imagine this chilling scene, these so-called ghost trains pulling into stations in eerie, terrifying silence, entirely filled with corpses. The perpetrators even left gruesome mocking messages scrawled on the walls in blood, reading, "This train is our independence gift to Nehru and Patel." And retaliations flowed brutally in both directions across that newly drawn Radcliffe line. Moving to Section 3, the miracle of Calcutta. While the sprawling fields of Punjab were burning with unprecedented communal violence, the government's true nightmare was actually located to the east, in the densely populated slums and bazaars of Calcutta. And why was Calcutta such a nightmare? Well, it comes down to this number, 55,000. A massive force of 55,000 soldiers, the Punjab Boundary Force, was entirely deployed to the west to manage the chaos there. That left absolutely zero military presence in Bengal to prevent a highly anticipated, catastrophic bloodbath in a city that was already deeply scarred by previous riots. Desperate for a miracle, Lord Mountbatten turned to Mahatma Gandhi. Mountbatten practically begged the 78-year-old leader to go to Calcutta and achieve with his presence and nonviolent ideals what tens of thousands of heavily armed troops simply could not. He actually called Gandhi his one-man boundary force. And in an unbelievable turn of events, Gandhi delivered exactly that miracle. He moved into an abandoned house with a controversial political rival just to build trust, but tensions were still flaring. So, on September 1st, Gandhi began a fast unto death. As his health rapidly deteriorated, a literal shockwave hit the city. In just 73 hours, the sight of the dying 78-year-old forced heavily armed rioters to literally drop their weapons at his feet and beg for forgiveness. Gandhi's fast permanently stopped the communal riots in Calcutta for as long as he lived. Just incredible.
We now shift gears to Section 4, integrating the princely states.
Dividing the British-ruled territory was really only half the battle. Next came the high-stakes political thriller of securing the independent princely states. And the scale of this challenge? Staggering, 565. That number represents the independent Rajwadas, or princely kingdoms. They had their own rulers, and legally, they had the right to declare sovereign independence once the British left. If they did, they threatened to turn the new map of India into a literal slice of Swiss cheese, completely destroying any hope of a unified, functioning nation. So, to secure these kingdoms and stitch the country together, Mountbatten and Sardar Patel, along with a brilliant civil servant named V.P. Menon, offered what they called a basket of apples deal. It was a highly pragmatic compromise. They guaranteed the kings their royal titles, their grand palaces, and massive pensions known as privy purses. But this was only in exchange for their immediate signatures on the instrument of accession, basically the legal document surrendering their sovereignty, and it had to be signed before the August 15th deadline. Section 5. Bizarre Holdouts and Junagadh. Now, as you can probably imagine, convincing over 500 royal monarchs to suddenly hand over absolute power resulted in some truly bizarre resistance. We're talking extreme panic and eccentricity here. The young king of Jodhpur was so distraught over losing his power that he dramatically pulled a mini pistol, disguised as a pen, and held it to V.P. Menon's head during negotiations. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. Then there was the Nawab of Junagadh, who formally joined Pakistan entirely out of fear. Why? Because someone convinced him that the Indian government was going to poison his 2,000 lavishly pampered pet dogs. He actually fled to Karachi in an airplane, prioritizing the safety of his dogs over everything else. However, the whims of the rulers didn't always match the will of the people. After the Nawab fled with his dogs, the Indian army surrounded the state, and an overwhelming 91% of Junagadh's Hindi-majority population later voted in a democratic plebiscite, a direct public vote, to formally integrate into India anyway.
But that brings us to Section 6, the battle for Kashmir.
This leaves us with the largest apple left outside Patel's basket, a state so strategically vital it would dictate the region's geopolitics for decades to come. The complexity here mirrored Junagadh perfectly, but in reverse. In Junagadh, you had a Muslim Nawab ruling over a Hindu majority, but the Kashmir paradox was the exact inverse. It was ruled by a Hindu Maharaja, Hari Singh, who governed a Muslim-majority population. And Hari Singh didn't want to join India or Pakistan. He dreamed of complete sovereign independence for Kashmir, stubbornly ignoring the ticking geopolitical clock. Well, that ticking clock finally ran out when Pakistani-backed tribal warriors invaded. And the escalation here was cinematic in its tension. It started with a sudden, total power cut in the capital during the festival of Dussehra when invaders blew up the Mahora power station. But then, the invaders made a fatal tactical error. They delayed their advance to brutally loot the town of Baramulla. And that delay, it gave a desperate Maharaja Hari Singh just enough time to finally sign the accession to India. Within hours, Indian troops were airlifted into Srinagar and successfully secured the airport. Following that dramatic airlift on October 27th, Indian forces began a strong military pushback against the invaders. Seeking a permanent resolution, India eventually took the issue to the United Nations. Exactly 1 year later, a formal ceasefire line was established, physically dividing the region and halting the immediate conflict, though, as we know, setting the stage for a dispute that remains highly active to this very day. Which leaves us with this final, really profound question to consider. Partition was a tragedy of immense, heartbreaking proportions, displacing millions due to lines drawn in absolute haste. But simultaneously, the integration of those princely states was nothing short of a geopolitical miracle, piecing together a massive, unified republic from 565 fragments. So, looking at these two massive opposing forces of history, what is your biggest takeaway from the chaotic, monumental year that built modern India and Pakistan? Definitely something to think about the next time you look at a map of the region.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe now for more amazing videos.